we'll do the live thing first. Like. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Bigmark podcast. It's me, your host, Bigmark. If it's your first time watching, welcome. If not, welcome back. Like I always say, if you ever wanted to reach out to the podcast and drop us a line and let us know if you wanted to hear a topic or come on the show, we always like to have guests. I mean, I kind of wanted to start this podcast out with doing more guests. I don't know. I should start asking more people to come on. But I still love doing these too because I'm always into something, reading something. And I just recently read a wicked book called Blitzed by Norman Ohler. And thought I'd talk about it. It kind of brought up some really interesting thoughts. If you wanted to, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you hit subscribe and like the videos if you're watching, and support the podcast through our Patreon too. If you want, you can check out our Patreon. But again, you know, we're always kind of like doing new things, new topics. That's what I always say. If you ever wanted to hear something specific, please let us know. And tell your friends, share the podcast and everything. But this book here, actually, Blitz, I got a copy here. I borrowed a copy from my buddy Justin at work. I actually had to listen to the audiobook because I fucking cannot just sit down and read a book. I don't know what it is. I just haven't tried lately, and I know I can really get an audiobook down pretty quick. And this audiobook, I think, was only like 6 or 7 hours. Again, Spotify Premium, you can get it in a month if you weren't listening to any other books. There's still a 15-hour limit on the Spotify audiobook, and I still am pissed. So I just got the notification the other day that I ran out of minutes to listen to. Like, what are we doing, man? It's not fucking 2009. No one's on minutes anymore. Why are we tracking people's listening? Who cares? Listen to 5 million audiobooks. What the fuck? They're like, oh, if you don't want to use all your minutes, make sure you put a sleep timer on so it doesn't just go through the night. So that means if it goes through the night, you're just fucked. Like, who cares, man? Let people listen to audiobooks. Anyway, super cool book, again, called Blitzed, subtitled Drugs in Nazi Germany. So it's kind of a really interesting thought. It's kind of talking about, you know, drug usage in Germany at the time of World War II and leading up to it. And then, of course, you know, Hitler's use of drugs, which was extensive, if you didn't know. I mean, the book starts this way, but it's a really good kind of starting point in the interwar period. So between World War I and World War II, Germany was kind of, well, not kind of, for all intents and purposes, they were kind of like crippled as a country. You know, they were sanctioned by the Treaty of Versailles, really put them in a tough place. They were owing all this money in reparations. They weren't allowed to have a standing army. There was all this, you know, all these sanctions put on them. So all they could really do was like science. So, you know, medicine, biology, mechanics, engineering, rocketeering, technology, chemical, whatever, except nuclear, actually. There were some scientists studying nuclear energy, but a lot of them were Jewish. So once Hitler kind of took into power, he didn't really look down or once the Nazis took into power, I should say, he didn't look down that road of nuclear power because he thought it was, you know, well, it was Jewish, and he thought it was a Jewish science. Let's just put it that way, just because Jewish scientists were working on it in his country. Anyway, obviously racist, obviously brutal, but kind of a good thing for the rest of the world, because that's a big reason why, you know, you kind of think, well, why didn't Germany have an atomic bomb program going? They had all these smart scientists, which we also took as North Americans, and well, the U.S. military took over all these, brought all these German scientists that were, most of them Nazis, working in, you know, human experiments in Nazi Germany during World War II. They were brought over in something called Operation Paperclip. I did a podcast on it a while back. You can go check it out. It's like 188 or 189 episodes to binge now, so go check them out. But yeah, Operation Paperclip, really, really interesting. But again, you'd think with all these scientists over there, they would have been working on an atomic bomb as well. But like I said, Hitler was a racist bastard. But anyway, so during this time and all that scientific research, there's a lot of time put into medicine, and then drugs were of course involved with that. And because they weren't really allowed to have a standing army and they didn't have very many people, kind of one of the stances, and Ubermensch and whatever you want to call it, with Hitler's idea of creating the perfect Aryan race, for many reasons, the German army was, or the German government, whatever, Germany was trying to develop drugs that could kind of make their soldiers superhuman, right? Because they don't have that many. It would help if they could, if they were capable of superhuman feats of strength, of endurance, of staying alert and awake for hours upon end. So there was a lot of study being put into all this stuff, and they were synthesizing chemicals, and they basically, and that during all that time they came up with anabolic steroids, and used that on their soldiers. A lot of the soldiers were on anabolic steroids, but then they were also on a plethora of all these stimulants and all these other drugs, again, that would help them through war and help them in these circumstances. So the science was obviously, just like it is today, mostly backed by, the government, but also with the idea that it was going to be militarized, right? It's kind of an idea that, listen, all right, we're going to create, this technology, and a lot of the technology that we see, cell phones, Wi-Fi, internet things, well, maybe not the internet, but a lot of technology that we see has already kind of filtered through the military first, and then meets kind of the civilian world. But methamphetamine was another drug that was heavily researched and synthesized during this time, and they started creating this over-the-counter medicine called Pervitin, and it was called the Volk's drug, the people's drug. And Norman Ohler, the author, kind of potentially conflates things a little bit, but a lot of the country was kind of on these stimulants and just ripping, and of course it was given to all the soldiers as well, and hundreds of thousands of pills were being consumed by the army, and it was allowing them to kind of walk, travel through the night, and they would just obviously kind of go for a few days, and then obviously have to crash eventually, right? Can't do that forever, but they were also developing other drugs to kind of help with the withdrawal or the hangover symptoms of coming off meth, to kind of recharge you and do all these things. There was a doctor that became Hitler's actual personal doctor that kind of created this Vitamultin, it was called. It was kind of just a vitamin mix. And they actually say some of these stimulant drugs kind of was basically, this was Norman Ohler's stance, is that it was kind of the impetus of Blitzkrieg. This is where that came from. This is what allowed the Germans to actually carry out Blitzkrieg and take this, because they're all fucking high as fuck. Again, later on we'll mention it too, but cocaine became a big part. They created this gum, this chewing gum, cocaine chewing gum, that a lot of the the German soldiers would take when they were on these missions that required, again, alertness and not losing any fatigue. The problem was, even then they were doing a lot of studies that, yes, you were more aware and awake with a lot of these drugs, but it didn't necessarily make your decision making any better. It didn't make you any better at anything you were doing. You were just happened to be also more awake. But there was these one-man submarine units. You basically were like riding a torpedo in through, and you could kind of like get around radar because you were so small, and you could fire off a torpedo and then like peel back to the ship or wherever you came from. And a lot of the soldiers would take, again, this cocaine gum and this Pervitin and all this stuff. They made it into chocolate called Panzer Chocolat, like tank chocolate. And again, it was just like used throughout all the soldiers. And like I mentioned, it kind of trickled down from the top because, as I mentioned earlier, Hitler's drug use was extensive. He had appointed a personal physician who he never actually was a part of the military himself. This doctor, he was always a civilian. I think Hitler liked it that way. But Dr. Theo Morell was Hitler's personal physician, and he was essentially appointed to Hitler and through much positioning of his own. Like, don't get me wrong, Dr. Morell had a hand in some of his fate. He kind of got, he weaseled his way into certain circumstances, if you will. But he was, again, essentially attached to Hitler's hip by the end of the war. He came on to help Hitler with fatigue and things like that. Hitler suffered from a pretty debilitating stomach issue. That was kind of why he didn't eat meat. He was known as a vegetarian, and it was bothersome. It would hurt it. He couldn't really do what he really wanted to do. Have those speeches and carry on the way he did. And he was always dealing with different physicians that couldn't really figure him out. And again, they were the only way they could really try to help him was by changing his diet. But when he met Dr. Morell started kind of injecting him with a bunch of shit, painkillers, what have you, all these different things. And it started to help Hitler's stomach. So Hitler was indebted to Morell. And again, this is kind of, so from 1941 and on, Morell was a part of Hitler's entourage. And again, kind of started with these painkiller treatments for the stomach, but because of these, the heavy effects of the painkillers, he had to start giving Hitler kind of some uppers to kind of get him a little bit more sharp, so he wasn't, lax and making fucking bad decisions. And so you can kind of see, I wouldn't necessarily say it started innocently, but you can see it's kind of started where it's like, all right, we're treating one thing, but it's starting to affect something else. And then you just see this fucking house of cards get built where it's like, we got to give him more stimulants, and now he's got to sleep. So now we're going to give him a sleep fucking aid. We're going to trank him out, and then he's feeling pain again. Then you got to give him that, and then he's sluggish. You got to get him up and moving. He's got a huge speech. You got to give him some more stimulants. Now he's all fucking like loopy or whatever, or he looks all bag, and you got to give him like some fucking B12, like all these different injections. Like, it's crazy what they were doing. And again, that was like the idea of German science at that time, was the body is a machine, and you can kind of just keep hitting it with different types of, additives, and it's gonna run better or worse depending. And yeah, you might blow a gasket here or there, but you can fix that too. So there's kind of this idea of like, just fucking go for it. Like, we'll fix it with more fucking drugs. And from those glucose and vitamin injections, it kind of was, again, that slippery slope towards the Pervitin and hormone injections that were filled with like bull testicle and like Cowper's gland and like, different animal hormones and stuff like that. So it kind of made Hitler no longer a vegetarian because he was using those products. And you could see how things were starting to kind of wear on Hitler. And in fact, injections and everything didn't even stop at Hitler. There was times where I think Hitler was meeting with president of Czechoslovakia or something like that, and the fucking poor guy passed out because he was just overwhelmed and probably just like knew he was looking down the eye of the barrel. He was in the belly of the beast and ends up passing out. And Morel fucking hits him with a jolt. The guy wakes up tripping out and he starts signing papers. So like again, these injections were getting handed out pretty willy-nilly, and like I mentioned, cocaine became a major part of it. Hitler was getting these injections with these, multiple uppers and downers, kind of speedballing it. He obviously became addicted to all these drugs. And then Morel tried to treat, those addictions and those withdrawal symptoms and things like that. And realistically, at the end of the day, Morel was just kind of chasing his own treatments and was trying to cover his own ass and realizing, there were other people, there were other doctors in Hitler's, sphere, but Morel did a really good job of kind of, boxing them out and not really ever letting them get to Hitler and kind of say like, hey, Morel's just fucking jabbing you with shit and now you're all fucked. Because, again, it kind of probably became this like Pavlovian response of like, Hitler felt like shit. Morel would come over there, give him a little injection, and all of a sudden, boom, he'd be better, right? So it's like Hitler probably became used to this guy and just said, hey. But like I said, Morel was really trying to cover his own ass, and at the end of the day, he just really couldn't keep up. He ended up getting fired by Hitler, and that was the end of Morel. He kind of tried to create his own like pharmaceutical lines, and that never worked out. And then we kind of all know how Hitler's demise finished, right? But it's a tremendous book. It's a pretty quick read, like I said, if you want to listen to it or read it. I think it makes a couple of straw man. There's a couple straw man arguments in there. There's a couple jumps. Like the Blitzkrieg's kind of interesting. It's hard to say that the whole idea of Blitzkrieg was just kind of born from this drug usage. You really can't be that high on methamphetamines all the time. You're going to your fucking teeth are going to fall out. You're going to start picking at your skin. We've all seen fucking meth heads, right? So, and then the use by the people and soldiers, like it's really hard to say how many were actually using this much. Like, yes, there were, hundreds of thousands of pills pressed, but who knows how many of those were actually taken. It's hard to say, but it's a really interesting book, a really interesting perspective. And, it kind of makes you think, like you look at this Morel character and he was obviously, a terrible person and, the right-hand man of one of the most evil people in the world. In history, I should say. And, you kind of look at it and you say, how could that person be like that? But again, he was kind of trying to just cover his own ass. And I think that happened to a lot of people in the Third Reich and Nazis or whatever you want to call them, just people in the German army. Knew it was either that or you're fucking dead, right? So it's tough. I mean, you want to say, hey, I would fucking take death over certain things that those fucking bastards did. And maybe you would, maybe you wouldn't. When you're faced with it, but again, just heinous operations. And this Morel guy, kind of in some ways could have possibly changed the fate of the war. I mean, like maybe this is my own straw man or this is my own kind of leap of logic. But, maybe Hitler's decisions were based on some snap decisions because he was all fucking tweaked out and shit. But like, if I'm this doctor, maybe I would start slowly. And like some of Hitler's entourage were they were accusing Morel of slowly poisoning the Führer. But again, super interesting. Like I said, really cool perspective. Maybe not the entire story of what happened, but again, it just offers that really interesting perspective of how much these substances were used, how the German people and how the German, scientific sphere and government and military all kind of work together. Yes, it was twisted, but it was, it was such an interestingly wound, so many intricate moving parts of the government that seemed to work relatively seamlessly. I mean, yes, like any dictatorship, people are being used and abused, and some people are recognizing their place in that hierarchy, and then taking advantage of the ones lower than them, and then just kowtowing to the ones above them. Again, human nature, survival, whatever you want to call it. But it sounds like World War II was pretty fueled by drugs. I'd love to find, let me know if anyone knows, if any listeners know. But I'd love to find an American version of this book. If there was some, I can't say clandestine, but like some military operations or research being done on performance enhancing drugs for American soldiers, because I know that they use go pills, as they call them, like speed pills, in the American Air Force, I guess it would be. It's one of the only, and they're one of the only militaries in the world that actually prescribe those to pilots. So super interesting, because those led to snap decisions that actually had some Canadians killed years ago, I think early 2000s. So again, these are the things that you think about. Maybe it's more prevalent than you think. Drugs. Check it out. Anyway, thanks for listening. Thanks for joining. Thanks for stopping by. I really appreciate it. Honestly, you could be anywhere. You could be listening to anything, and I really appreciate you listening to this little rinky-dink thing I got going on. I love doing it. Like I said, I want to talk to more people. I want to get more people on here, get more perspectives, and again, just kind of, bring this family together. I know I've done many podcasts and many episodes and many different topics, I should say, and I don't just do it to oh, look at me, I'm just talking here, right? It's to try to bring some of these ideas to the front, to people who maybe you've never heard of it, maybe you've never thought about it, look into it a little bit more, because so it's hard for me to tell the whole story. I never know the whole thing. But I can tell you what I know at least, and we can start a little convo. So hit me up, hit me back, just to chat. Truly yours, your biggest friend. This is Bigmark. Thanks all for listening. Check it out. YouTube's drugs. Hitler. He sucks. Talk to you soon. Peace.